For almost 40 years, one American company ran the strangest advertisement in the history of television. No product demonstration. Nobody said the price. It was just a man sitting alone in a chair, in a blue work uniform, next to a telephone that never rang. He played solitaire. He worked crossword puzzles. He looked at the phone. That was the commercial. And everybody watching understood exactly what was being said, because the joke was the entire pitch. This man has nothing to do because our machines do not break. Think about the confidence that takes. You are betting your whole reputation on national television every night for 4 decades on the claim that your customers will never need you. And here is the part that still gets me. It was basically true. Those washers ran 20 and 25 years in basements all over this country. So this is how a company in a small town in Iowa made the boldest promise in American manufacturing, kept it for 3 generations, and then bent it all. Stay with me to the end, because the last machine that company ever built is still out there, and there are 550 names written on the front of it. It starts with a slow winter. In Newton, Iowa, about 30 miles east of Des Moines, a man named Frederick Maytag built farm equipment. Farm work is seasonal, and winters were quiet. So in 1907, he started making washing machines in the off-season, and from the beginning, the thing he sold was not features. It was dependability. That word was on everything. Maytag built machines the way you build equipment for people who cannot afford a breakdown during harvest. Heavy castings, simple mechanisms, a transmission that could take a beating, parts a normal person could get at. By the middle of the century, Maytag was not the biggest appliance company in America. It was something better. It was the one people saved up for. And that reputation came out of one town on one line, built by people who mostly lived within a few miles of the factory, many of them the second or third in their family to work there. Remember that town? We come back to it, and it is the hardest part of this story. Now, in 1967, the company did something with that reputation nobody had ever done. Its advertising agency in Chicago invented a character and called him the loneliest guy in town. A repairman in uniform, sitting in an empty service department with a phone that would not ring. They hired a veteran character actor named Jesse White, and he stayed in that chair for 21 years and 68 commercials. They eventually gave him a basset hound for company and named the dog Newton after the town. When White stepped away, Gordon Jump took over in 1989. The warm, rumpled actor America knew as the station manager on a hit sitcom, and he sat there until 2003. Understand what that campaign actually was, because it is rarer than it looks. A slogan is a claim you make. This was a claim you could be caught on. Every Maytag that failed, every service call that did get made, was a piece of evidence against the company's own commercial. They ran it anyway for 4 decades, and it became one of the longest-running characters in advertising history. You do not do that unless the factory floor is holding up its end. The repairman was not a mascot. He was a receipt. So how does a company like that end up sold? Not the way you would think. Nobody in Newton stopped building good machines. The trouble started in a boardroom. Through the late 1980s, Maytag went shopping. It bought Magic Chef in 1986, roughly doubling the company overnight. It bought Hoover, the vacuum company, in 1989, which came with a large European business. On paper, that is a strategy. In practice, a focused company that made a few things extremely well turned into a sprawling one, making a lot of things at a lot of price points on borrowed money. The debt piled up, and the thing that had always made Maytag different, spending more on the inside of a machine than the competition did, got harder to defend in every budget meeting, because now a dozen other brands in the building were asking for the same dollar. And then the Hoover purchase produced something so spectacularly bad, it is still taught as a warning. In late 1992, Hoover's British division ran a promotion. Buy 100 pounds of Hoover products, get 2 free plane tickets worth about 6 times that. Britain did the math, bought the cheapest qualifying item on the shelf, and filed claims by the hundreds of thousands. Hoover could not supply the seats, pulled back on the offer, and got sued by customers who had already bought and filed. It ran in the newspapers for years and cost tens of millions. And notice what that was: not a manufacturing failure. A promotion designed in a meeting to move volume in a bad quarter. The company built on the factory floor took its worst wound from a spreadsheet. Then the trouble came home. In 1997, Maytag launched the Neptune, a front-loading washer meant to be the future. High efficiency, less water, a serious premium price. It was also the moment the company stopped selling simplicity and started selling complexity, which its whole century had been an argument against. Owners reported mold and a smell inside the door seal, along with failures in the door lock and the electronic controls. Complaints, then recalls, then a class action that ended in a settlement covering a very large number of machines. Read that against the commercial. For 30 years, the company's entire public argument had been a man beside a phone that would not ring. Now the phone was ringing, and the people picking it up were the customers who had paid the most for the flagship because they believed the man in the chair. To be fair, and this channel does not do cartoon villains, front-loaders across the industry had versions of this problem in those years, and other manufacturers ended up in similar settlements. Maytag was not uniquely careless. Maytag was uniquely exposed, because Maytag was the one company on Earth that had spent 40 years promising America this would never happen. By the middle of the 2000s, the company carried a decade of acquisition debt, a damaged premium reputation, and a price war it was not built to win. In 2006, Whirlpool bought Maytag for about $1.7 billion. And now the hardest part. 6 weeks after the deal closed, Whirlpool announced it would shut the Newton plant and the Maytag headquarters. Whirlpool's position, stated publicly at the time, was that the Maytag business was losing money and could not be modernized as it stood, and I am going to leave that where the company put it. What is not in dispute is what it meant on the ground. Production moved to non-union plants in Ohio. In a town of roughly 15,000 people, About 1,800 jobs went away. At its peak, Maytag had employed something like 4,000 people in Newton. There were families 3 generations deep in that plant. On the 25th of October, 2007, the last washers and dryers came off the line. 550 people finished the final shift and walked out of a factory the size of about 7 supermarkets. And before that last machine left the line, the workers who built it signed their names across the front panel. Think about that. Not a protest, not a slogan, just people putting their names on the last thing they made, the way you sign a piece of work you are not ashamed of. Now the honest ending, because it is more complicated than the sad one. Maytag did not vanish. Whirlpool still sells appliances under the Maytag name, still leans on dependability in the advertising, and there is still a Maytag man in the commercials, though he stopped being a lonely repairman years ago and became a younger, fitter figure standing in for the machines themselves. The brand survived. But listen to what changed in the ad. The old campaign was a man with nothing to do. The new one is a man doing things. Somewhere in there, the boast quietly stopped being made. And here is where I keep my promise. Go down into basements in this country, and you will still find them. Heavy top-loading Maytags from the 70s and the 80s, dented, humming, on their 3rd house and their 2nd family. There are independent repair shops that will tell you exactly which model years to hunt for at estate sales, because those transmissions can be rebuilt and the parts still turn up. There are people who will drive 2 hours for a used one rather than buy new, and they are not being sentimental. They are being practical, which is the highest compliment a machine can get. The company made a promise on television for 40 years. The company was sold, the town was emptied, and the promise stopped being printed. But 550 people signed the last one, and thousands of the earlier ones are still running tonight in the dark, quietly finishing the argument. The repairman was never the product. The people in Newton were. If there is an old machine in your basement or your grandmother's garage that has simply refused to quit, tell me what it is and how old. Because the 1954 stove and the toolbox stories you all left me have become the best part of this channel, and I read every one. The list of things still built the old way is free in the description. And subscribe, because this is the place where we remember how things used to be made.